He said, "Man, that sure is some good-looking stagecoach. That's what they call a motor, a bus, a motor."
The winner is Ernest Borgnine.
For 60 years, Ernest Borgnine stayed quiet. He never spoke publicly about the chaos, the screaming matches, the sabotage. The moment a cup of hot coffee flew across a Hollywood set and left someone with second-degree burns, he never confirmed the rumors until it was almost too late. Behind the goofy grin and Navy uniform was a man carrying secrets darker than anyone imagined. Secrets about Oscar winners, jealous co-stars, and violent outbursts that nearly ended his career. The public knew him as a lovable television star, but inside studios and sound stages he was walking through fire, sometimes literally. From chasing live chickens on stage to watching two actresses nearly claw each other's faces off, Ernest Borgnine saw the best and worst of Hollywood. And then there was the marriage. So toxic, it ended not with a quote but a blank page in a best-selling autobiography. This isn't the story of a nice guy who made it big. This is the story of a man who survived wars on the battlefield and behind the camera. And today, the truth finally comes out. Before he was a Hollywood legend, before the Oscars and the television fame, Ernest Borgnine was just a kid named Ernest Borgnine. Born in 1917 in Hamden, Connecticut, he was the son of Italian immigrants trying to find their place in America. But by the time he turned 2, that quiet beginning shattered. His parents split up and his mother whisked him away to Italy. It wasn't a short trip. It was 5 years of complete immersion. A tiny boy suddenly dropped into the streets of Carpi, speaking only Italian, surrounded by strangers who didn't look or sound anything like the world he'd been born into. For young Ernest, America faded into memory. He forgot English. He forgot Connecticut. He became Italian in every way that mattered. But in 1923, the story flipped again. His parents reunited and dragged him back to the States. Just like that, he was a foreigner in his own country, an Italian-speaking boy in a very American town. The reinvention didn't stop there. His father, once Camillo, became Charles. The family name was shortened to Borgnine, all in an effort to fit in. But for Ernest, this wasn't just paperwork. It was an identity crisis. One moment he was Ernest Borgnine, the next he was Ernest Borgnine, expected to leave the old world behind and blend into a new one. That early split between cultures, between countries left a mark. He didn't grow up with big dreams of movie stardom. He didn't sneak into theaters or fantasize about Hollywood sets. He was a quiet, physical kid. He liked sports, not scripts. His high school yearbook didn't list actor under ambitions. Not even close. And that's what makes what happened next so unbelievable. In 1935, with no clear future ahead, Ernest Borgnine did what countless restless young men did during the Great Depression. He joined the Navy. Fresh out of high school, barely 18, he found himself aboard the USS Lamberton, a destroyer ship slicing through Pacific waters. For the next 6 years, he wasn't dreaming of lights, cameras, or applause. He was manning weapons, scrubbing decks, learning discipline the hard way. But just as he was preparing for a new chapter in civilian life, the world changed overnight. December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor was attacked. America was at war. And Borgnine couldn't stand on the sidelines. He re-enlisted almost immediately. This time he served aboard the USS Sylph, a patrol yacht guarding the Atlantic coast. The danger was constant. The stress unrelenting. But something clicked. The uniform, the structure, the brotherhood, it all fit him. He wasn't just good at it, he thrived. By the time he left the service in 1945, he'd risen to gunner's mate first class and earned military honors most actors only pretend to wear. He nearly stayed for good. He considered signing up for another 10 years. And had he done it, Hollywood would have never known his name. But then, out of nowhere, came a single sentence that changed everything. His mother looked at him and said, "You've got a forceful personality. You should be an actor." She said it like it was obvious. He laughed. He had zero experience, no theater background, no connections. But her words stuck. It wasn't a dream. It was a dare, and he took it. Most actors start with a dream. Ernest Borgnine started with a bar of soap and a sack of potatoes. When he enrolled in the Randall School of Drama in Hartford, he wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing a challenge. His first break didn't come with red carpets or applause. It came from the Barter Theater in Virginia, a Depression-era stage where audiences paid with chickens, apples, and bread. For Borgnine, that was enough. He scrubbed toilets, painted sets, repaired costumes. Whatever it took to stay in the game, he wasn't too proud to get his hands dirty. He knew he was starting from zero. One night, in the middle of a live performance, a chicken escaped its cage on stage. Chaos broke out. The bird flapped into the audience, kids screamed, actors froze. But Borgnine didn't. He chased that chicken like it was part of the script, caught it mid-stride, and brought it back in character. The crowd roared. And in that moment he realized something that would define his entire career. You don't panic, you perform. Every setback was a lesson. Every disaster was a test. He worked beside future legends like Gregory Peck and Patricia Neal, not as a peer, but as a student. He soaked in everything. Then came his first real shot. Tennessee Williams' The Glass Menagerie. He thought he bombed, but the audience thought otherwise. Suddenly, people took notice. By 1949, he made it to Broadway. His first role? A male nurse in Harvey, starring alongside none other than James Stewart. Borgnine knew he wasn't the star. He didn't try to be. He stood backstage between scenes, taking notes on Stewart's delivery, timing, movement, every gesture. That play ran for 1,775 performances. Night after night, Borgnine sharpened his skills. Not in acting class, not on a sound stage, but on live stages, under hot lights, in front of real people. He didn't skip steps. He climbed every one. By the time From Here to Eternity came along in 1953, Ernest Borgnine had clawed his way onto the Hollywood radar. But he wasn't prepared for what came next. The role was Sergeant Fatso Judson, a brutal prison guard who takes sadistic pleasure in beating down a fellow soldier played by Frank Sinatra. It wasn't just a supporting part, it was a test. Could Borgnine play evil? Not just mean, but monstrous. Even Sinatra had doubts. He didn't think the friendly, thick-set Navy vet had it in him. He was wrong. Borgnine went all in. He isolated himself on set, stayed away from cast and crew, and tapped into a darkness he didn't even know he had. When the cameras rolled, something shifted. He wasn't acting. He was unleashing. The infamous nightstick beating scene left audiences stunned. The violence felt real. Too real. Sinatra stopped speaking to him off camera. Some crew members avoided him entirely. And when the film came out, the reaction wasn't praise. It was panic. Viewers were horrified. Borgnine, the Navy man with a quick smile, had become a cinematic monster. And people couldn't separate the two. The hate mail poured in. Death threats, letters full of venom, complete strangers who believed he truly was the sadist on screen. But what they didn't know was that Borgnine wasn't unscathed. That role stuck with him like a shadow. He had nightmares. He woke up in cold sweats, replaying the scene over and over. The fake blood, the screaming, the look on Sinatra's face. It all burned into his memory. That single performance pushed him to the edge, and it nearly swallowed him. But it also did something else. It proved to Hollywood and to himself that he could do more than chase chickens and play side roles. He could scare people. He could shake them. And just 2 years later, he would do the opposite and win an Oscar for it. After terrifying audiences as Fatso Judson, Ernest Borgnine did something no one saw coming. He played a lonely, gentle-hearted butcher looking for love. The role was Marty Paletti in the small, low-budget film Marty, and it couldn't have been further from the violent brute he'd just portrayed. This wasn't about blood or beatings. It was about heartbreak, insecurity, a man asking, "Why not me?" The film had no major stars, no big money, and almost no studio support. In fact, Borgnine wasn't even supposed to be in it. Director Delbert Mann wanted Rod Steiger, who had already played Marty on live television. Borgnine wasn't on anyone's shortlist. But then, at a Hollywood party, fate stepped in. One of the producers met Borgnine, talked to him for 5 minutes, and saw something real. They offered him a screen test. He walked in, didn't overplay it, didn't fake anything. Just delivered the lines like he meant them. And that was it. The role was his. When Marty premiered, no one expected much. It was shot in 16 days on a shoestring budget of $343,000. But something about the film hit people deep. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't glossy. It was human. And Borgnine, playing a soft-spoken man who thought love had passed him by, crushed it. He didn't act the role. He lived it. When the 1955 Academy Awards came around, the unthinkable happened. Borgnine beat out James Dean, Spencer Tracy, and Frank Sinatra to win Best Actor. At 38, with no leading man looks and no traditional training, he stood on stage holding the industry's biggest prize. And in a moment that couldn't have been scripted better, he looked out and thanked the person who made it all happen, his mother. The same woman who once told him, out of nowhere, that he should try acting. And the best part? Even after winning Hollywood's top honor, Borgnine never let it go to his head. He still wore the same shoes, still drove the same car. And when asked how it felt to beat legends like James Dean, he just laughed and said, "I guess they needed a butcher." Fresh off his Oscar win, Ernest Borgnine was flying high. Offers poured in, studios came calling, and then came a curious offer. Television, a sitcom, the lead role in The Real McCoys. But Borgnine laughed it off. Like most movie stars of the 1950s, he saw television as a downgrade, a temporary fad. Television? He said to reporters. It'll never last. He turned it down without a second thought, and the role went to Walter Brennan, who turned it into a household name. But life has a way of humbling you. A few years later, at a charity event, Borgnine met a young boy with a terminal illness. The boy grabbed his hand and said something that stuck with him forever. "When I'm in the hospital, your movies make me happy." That moment cracked something open. Borgnine realized something he hadn't before. Television wasn't just screens and scripts. It was comfort. It was connection. It reached people who couldn't make it to a theater. It mattered. And when McHale's Navy came along, he didn't hesitate. He said yes. And this time, he didn't just act. He owned it. As Lieutenant Commander Quentin McHale, Borgnine brought a chaotic charm to a crew of misfits. The show was funny, wild, and surprisingly sharp, and audiences loved it. It ran for 4 seasons and turned Borgnine into a different kind of star, one who visited people's living rooms every week. But here's the twist. The show didn't just entertain. It influenced the actual U.S. Navy. A declassified memo from 1965 revealed that military officials had been watching the show and found McHale's problem-solving techniques useful. So useful, in fact, that they created Operation McHale, a real series of naval training exercises inspired by a sitcom. Think about that. A former war hero plays a fake Navy officer on television, and the real Navy uses it for strategy. That's the kind of strange, full-circle story only Borgnine could live. And he did it all after publicly mocking the idea of television. Years later, he admitted it. "I was a fool to think television was beneath me," he said. "It's not about the size of the screen. It's about the size of the audience's heart." Ernest Borgnine didn't just live through 5 marriages. He survived them. Some ended in heartbreak, some in scandal, one in total silence. His first marriage to Rhoda Kemp was before the fame. They tied the knot in 1949, had a daughter named Nancy in 1952, and tried to build a quiet life. But Hollywood doesn't do quiet. As Borgnine's career exploded, his marriage imploded. Fame pulled him in one direction, reality tugged in another. By 1958, it was over. Then came Katie Jurado, a fiery Mexican actress known for stealing scenes on screen and lighting up headlines off it. They married in 1959, and from the start, it was a storm. Passionate fights, public arguments, red carpet standoffs, the kind of love that burns too hot to last. By 1963, They had enough. And just a year later, Borgnine walked into the shortest and strangest chapter of his love life. Ethel Merman, Broadway royalty. A match made in celebrity heaven for about 5 minutes. They married in June 1964, jetted off to Japan for a honeymoon, and it all fell apart before the return flight. Fans mobbed Borgnine everywhere. Merman, used to being the center of attention, felt ignored. Tensions exploded in Tokyo. Witnesses later described a screaming match so loud, hotel guests complained. And then came the moment that became legend. Merman threw her diamond and pearl ring into a koi pond. By July, she filed for divorce. The entire marriage lasted 32 days. But the final insult came years later, in her autobiography. She titled a chapter, My Marriage to Ernest Borgnine. Readers turned the page and found it completely blank. No words, no explanation, just white space. A silent burn that said more than any paragraph ever could. Borgnine never forgot it. That blank page, he said in an interview, was a slap in the face I'll never forget. After that, he married Donna Rancourt in 1965. They had 3 children together, Sharon, Christopher, and Diana. Things seemed stable until they weren't. That marriage ended in 1972. And then finally, after decades of misfires, he met the one who changed everything, Tove Tresnes, a Norwegian businesswoman with sharp instincts and zero interest in fame. At first, she was hesitant. She'd heard the rumors, the divorces, the drama. But Borgnine was different now. Softer, grounded. They married in 1973. And unlike the others, this one stuck. For nearly 40 years, they were inseparable. Tove built a beauty empire. Borgnine became her biggest cheerleader, even joking in interviews that he was the oldest Avon lady in the world after appearing in her ads. He credited her with saving him, centering him, loving him without conditions. In his final interview, just weeks before he passed at age 95, Borgnine smiled and said, "I'm still going strong, and I think it's because of the love I have for Tove." Behind Ernest Borgnine's easy laugh and affable screen presence was a man who had weathered some of the nastiest behind-the-scenes chaos Hollywood ever produced. His most famous feud? That would be with Shelley Winters on The Poseidon Adventure. On screen, they played a married couple struggling to survive a sinking ship. Off-screen, it was a different kind of survival. Winters was relentless, demanding rewrites, bringing 20-page backstories to set, pushing for control over every detail. Directors pushed back, writers resisted. Borgnine? He was stuck in the middle. It came to a head during a brutal underwater scene. Winters insisted on doing her own stunts, even at 51. What should have been a quick shoot dragged on for 14 hours and 65 takes. Tensions rose, patience wore thin. Borgnine later called it one of the hardest days of his entire career. But even he had to admit, Winters got the last word. Her performance earned her an Oscar nomination. Years later, Borgnine described her as a force of nature, difficult, unpredictable, but always unforgettable. And she wasn't the only one. Back in 1955, during Bad Day at Black Rock, Borgnine found himself face-to-face with another kind of storm, Spencer Tracy. A 2-time Oscar winner and a legend on set, Tracy didn't follow scripts. He reinvented them. He improvised, riffed, changed lines mid-scene. Borgnine, still proving himself, was rattled. One day, Tracy threw in an unexpected line during a high-stakes moment. Borgnine froze. That take made the final cut. On another day, he flubbed his lines 7 times in a row. Tracy's glare made the air feel heavier with each mistake. Then came the diner fight scene, the one everyone remembers. Tracy, playing a one-armed veteran, had to take down Borgnine's thug character using judo. No stunt doubles, just sweat and timing. On the 7th take, Borgnine accidentally clocked Tracy in the jaw. Silence fell over the set. Tracy paused, then shrugged it off like nothing happened. That moment shifted everything. The intimidation faded. The respect kicked in. A few months later, Tracy quietly recommended Borgnine for the lead in Marty. Without that fight, without that bruised jaw, Borgnine might have never won his Oscar. And if those two feuds weren't enough, nothing compared to what happened on the set of Johnny Guitar. That's where Borgnine saw real madness. Joan Crawford and Mercedes McCambridge weren't co-stars. They were enemies. It started with a jealous grudge. Crawford learned that McCambridge had once dated her husband, and that was enough to launch a Cold War. One day, Crawford stormed onto set, grabbed McCambridge's costumes, and threw them onto the highway. The crew had to scramble to save them from the Arizona dust. Things only escalated. The two women refused to be in the same room. Scenes had to be shot separately and spliced together later. Then, during a shouting match, it all exploded literally. They went from insults to fists. Borgnine and Sterling Hayden had to physically pull them apart. And if that wasn't enough, Crawford once threw a cup of hot coffee at a young production assistant, scalding him. Second-degree burns, no apology. Just rage. Joan was like a ticking time bomb, Borgnine said years later. You never knew what would set her off. But the most surreal moment came at the very end of filming. Crawford, known for her fury, handed out personalized bottles of Pepsi to the crew. Her husband was the CEO. A sweet gesture? Maybe. But just before leaving, she turned to McCambridge and, in a voice loud enough for the entire set to hear, promised, "I will ruin your career." And Borgnine believed her. He'd seen enough to know. She meant it. Most actors slow down with age. Ernest Borgnine didn't understand the concept. By the time he was in his late 60s, he was jumping into helicopters for Airwolf, doing his own stunts, and brushing off near death like it was just another day on set. In 1985, during a routine shoot, a helicopter lost control and came crashing down just feet from where he stood. Any slower, and it would have ended him. But Borgnine walked away with a couple scrapes and a shrug. That was his style. He didn't flinch, he worked. And just when the industry thought it had seen all he had to offer, he reinvented himself again. Not as a war hero or a tough cop, but as a superhero. In the late 90s, his grandson, barely old enough to reach the remote, begged him to watch a new cartoon. It was weird, colorful, loud, and it was called SpongeBob SquarePants. Borgnine didn't get it, but his grandson loved it. And one night at a charity gala, Borgnine jokingly mentioned this to a Nickelodeon executive. They handed him a napkin and asked him to read a few lines, right there at the dinner table. He did. The voice clicked. The timing was perfect. And that's how Ernest Borgnine, Hollywood tough guy and Oscar winner, became Mermaid Man, the semi-retired, utterly ridiculous underwater superhero who shouted things like "evil" with booming seriousness. Kids adored him, adults were shocked, and Borgnine was thrilled. He recorded for the show over 13 years, appearing in 17 episodes. He loved every second of it. It wasn't just work. It was legacy. His final recording session happened just 2 weeks before his death. At 95 years old, while most of his peers had long since faded from the spotlight, Ernest Borgnine was still making kids laugh, still giving performances, still saying yes. In the end, that was his real superpower. Not strength or speed, but endurance. He never stopped evolving, never stopped surprising people. And when he finally passed away on July 8, 2012, with his wife Tova by his side, he left behind something no award could measure. A career that spanned generations, genres, and galaxies. From the deck of a warship to the bottom of the sea, Borgnine proved one thing over and over again: legends don't retire. They just keep going.